Welcome. This afternoon's webinar is on revolutionizing education with Moodle individualized learning plans. My name is Dr. Tammy Frame, and I'm the Chief Education Officer for eClass for Learning. This is my email and contact information and our website. We will be recording today's webinar, and anybody that signed up will get a link to the recording. And I will also have my contact information on that email as well if you have additional questions. Okay, I'm very excited about today's topic. We're going to do today's webinar in 3 parts. Part 1 and Part 2 are related. Part 3 overlaps, okay, and we'll talk about that when we get to Part 3. So we're going to begin with talking about competencies, and then learning plans, and then outcomes. And the reason today's webinar really excites me is I see a lot of movement in education towards more personalized learning and competency-based education, and those are really exciting things, but technology is making it more and more possible to realize the dream of how educators would like to organize learning, and it's very hard to manage that if you don't have technological processes to track everything for each student, especially as it becomes more and more individualized. Okay, so we'll be talking about how Moodle does this. Okay, today's webinar is done in GoToWebinar, and there is a place where you can ask questions. You can just expand that by hitting the plus sign. And if you would do that, that would be fantastic. I think the webinars are a lot more fun when people ask questions. And even if I don't know the answer, because this is a fairly new features that I've been learning just ahead of you, I will research them and get back to you too if there's something I can't answer, and we can put that in the follow-up email too. So I think if we can act as a learning community and you can ask questions as we go forward, please do that. That makes it a lot more fun. Okay, that is the end of my slides, and now we're going to actually go to the Moodle Learning Management System itself, and we're going to get started in talking about this. Now, first of all, part 1 of our presentation is about competencies and how the system can track and measure competencies across the system. And competencies can be attached to courses or activities, but they're bigger than that. And so they can be tracked across many things that the student does. You do need Moodle 3.1 is where competencies and learning plans were added. Outcomes was in Moodle 2.4. So just a plug for our clients. We put out an email this month asking if you wanted to upgrade to 3.1, and there's no charge for that. And I would encourage you to do that if you're willing, because then you'll have all of these new tools for measuring competencies and creating individualized learning plans available to you. So all you have to do is send an email and say, yep, I'd like to be upgraded, and then Sandra from our company will work with a time that works for you guys to do the upgrade. And you don't have to do anything, but we just want to do it usually in the middle of the night when your users are off the system, and we'll do the upgrade for you. Okay, so what are competencies? Competencies often go with competency-based education, also known as CBA, and it's we're seeing more and more movement towards this. So instead of saying, let's just say hypothetically, that to graduate you have to pass all of your courses, maybe your system moves more to a system of, in order to graduate, you need to demonstrate that you are proficient in this list of competencies. And so that's what these tools are built to help track and help make possible. So if you want to use the new competency tools in Moodle, the first thing you have to do is you have to go to the site administration. You have to be a site administrator to do the beginning setup, okay? And the very first thing that the site administrator has to do is enable competencies to be used across the site. And I think there's no harm in turning that on, especially for teachers and people that want to use it. So now, if you're in Moodle 3.1 and above, there is now in our menu of tools one called Competencies. And the first thing the site administrator will need to do is go to Competency Settings and make sure that these two things are checked. And in Moodle Site Administration, any box that is checked means yes, they do tell you what the default was. It's not inverse. It isn't so like if it says the default is yes and we check it, it's no. It just means if it's checked, it's on. So we want to enable competencies, and we want also the ability to rate those competencies and be pushed to individual learning plans. I would recommend that you enable both of those things. Okay, so that's step one, is the site administrator has to enable it. Now, the second thing that we have to do, step two, is to enable or to set up our competency frameworks. And again, that is going to be done with somebody with site admin rights. And so if we go again to site admin, competencies, now we go to competency frameworks. Okay, so you can see that I have one competency framework already set up, 21st Century Skills. After it is the framework ID, and that is something that is required, and I'll point that out in a minute. And I have 5 competencies in this framework. Now, you can have as many frameworks as you want, and those can be attached to different types of learning and different activities across the site. So maybe this is one that I'm going to have for my high school students in order to graduate. But maybe I make a new competency framework for principals and for their professional development and standards that and criteria and competencies that they're working towards. And I tie professional development and learning to them. And then maybe I have teacher competencies, and they are demonstrating competencies across the site, doing that too. So one person asked, how could this be used for professional development? It could be both professional development and students. You can have different categories of learning. You could have professional development, and then you could have the courses for students, for example, and then you can have different competency frameworks that you're pulling from. So let's open the framework that I already created, and I didn't put all the 21st century skills, but I put a few. And when I select one, so let's start with Think Creatively, there we go. You can see more of what goes with that competency. Now, you can see that I started putting a sub-level, and I name these as behaviors underneath. They don't have to be behaviors. We'll talk about that you can have up to 4, what would I call them, 4 subcategories. So this would be a level 1, this would be level 2, we could have a level 3 and a level 4. And you can name those different things. Moodle calls that the taxonomy, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now if I wanted to add another sub part of Think Creatively, I could add it here. If I wanted to add a whole nother competency, I could click under here, and we'll just go to Add Competency. And from here, we put where it's going to go under. Okay, so if I wanted it here, for example, I could select there, and then it would be a sub piece of Work Creatively with Others. And I decided that my second level will be called Behaviors. They don't have to, and I'll show you how we control that in a minute. But that's how I can add that to my framework as I go. Anything in Moodle with an asterisk has to be filled in. So we have to give it a name. You do not have to put a description if you don't want to. ID number used to be optional in a lot of Moodle things. For the competencies, it's critical that you make up an ID number when they ask for it, and that be unique and not used anywhere else on the site. Okay, so then let's just go back and talk a little bit more about our frameworks. If we wanted to add a new competency framework, again, this is just the framework. So let's say this is going to be for principals. You know, I would put in the name of the framework. We'll just go ahead and do this. And then I can make any kind of an ID number, which can have letters and numbers. Just put it there. And then we have different scales that we can use to how we're going to assess the competency. And for right now, I'll stick with the default competence scale. They also have like one that's satisfactory, unsatisfactory, separate and connected ways of knowing. You can also create your own scale. So later when we come to outcomes, they also use scales. I created a custom one called Simple TAMI scale, and then you can choose that too. And I'll show you later where and how I did that. And you can configure your own scales here. We'll make it visible. This is where taxonomies are, and for a long time I was thrown off by the word taxonomies. What do they mean? What they mean is, what do you want to call these different levels? And so in my little example, I chose to call the highest level, or the first level of my hierarchy, competency. And then I chose behavior for my second level. So different organizations have different vocabulary, right? So they let you choose from concept, domain, indicator, level, outcome, practice, proficiency, skill, or value. And that's going to be different from every organization and kind of what their criteria looks like and how it's organized. But I could say, you know, anything nested under here is a behavior, under here is a skill, and maybe this is a proficiency. I'm not sure that really makes sense, but however that works. So then if I did that, we'll just go back to competency frameworks in case this is confusing. I was a little confused at first too. So in mine, I called this level 1 a competency. See how it says selected competency, and I called this level 2 selected behavior. And so you can just kind of name those things as your organization refers to them. So that's how the competency framework works. And again, to add competencies, you can start adding them here. And you can add the different levels, and so there you go. So let's just kind of review. Step 1 was the site administrator had to enable competencies on the site. Step 2 is you had to set up a competency framework. Step 3 is you have to add your competencies to the framework. Okay, so that's the initial work of the site administrator. There are plugins, and I will put this in the follow-up email, that you can use to, free plugins to import competencies. So if you have them in a CSV file, let's say, or you can export them that way, you can import them so you don't have to type or cut and paste each and every one. Okay. The other thing that I want to say before we leave here that I forgot is this little edit. If you wanted to, you could add rules for the competency, and that means how we will mark off that people have met the competency. And that could be done by the teacher at the course level, or you can override at the site level where we are right now as a site administrator and say across the entire site, in order to get this checked off, we're going to make this rule. Okay. Oh, and that one, because it's probably, all right, let's do this one. Let's go to edit and competency rule. So now it says outcome, and we have some rules that we could say. We could say that in order for the student to show competency of this competency, they have to attach evidence. Maybe it's a link to a video they did. Maybe it's some work that they upload. Maybe it's a link to their ePortfolio in a certain place, but they have to attach that evidence. And then the reviewer, which could be a teacher, could be somebody else, will go in and review the evidence and mark whether or not it is competent. So that's one way or one rule that we could say. We could say that if we put this in different courses and attach it to learning, and we set up what completion means in those courses, which we'll do for a little bit. If they completed it in the course and they showed they were competent in that learning or course or activity, we're just going to mark them as complete then. We're going to say, okay, they showed this in Foundations of Online Learning, and they successfully completed this activity that has this competency attached. So if it's complete there, it's complete here. And then it would just be marked off in the completion report. Great, we've got a question. Okay, so the question is this a separate Moodle course for each student? Or is this a collective where students add their personal info to a collective course? Okay, excellent question. It's bigger than a course. So get rid of the whole course idea. Think of it more as if you had a high school and you had a list of competencies that they needed to graduate from high school. And maybe it's an online high school. Let's just even say that, or a blended high school. And we have that competency in 4 or 5 courses. And you'll see later where students can see the pathways in which they could get that competency done, okay? And in order to graduate, the student will have dashboards, which we'll see in a little bit, and they will see learning plans, and it will have these competencies in them that they have to finish, okay? And then what you will do is this is tracking what competencies they've done and which ones they haven't, regardless of what courses they're enrolled in. And then they can make choices, let's say from the course catalog, of which courses have the competencies that they don't have, or they might be able to upload evidence to show that they have those competencies. And the reviewer, which might be a teacher, might be somebody, their exact teacher or somebody else, will review any evidence that they've uploaded and mark them as competent. Or if it's attached to certain learning in a course, it might be automatically by Moodle checked off, because let's say they took a test and that showed that competency and they got 100. Then Moodle says, okay, they not only do they get 100 in the grade book for that course, I'm also going over to their competency in their profile and saying they are now competent in that competency. And so that's kind of much bigger than just looking at a course. And we're going to get to courses and how we attach the competencies in a course, but know that when the student is looking at their competencies, it's in their profile. And we'll look at it from the student view later. And they're working towards being competency. It's like standards for graduation or something like that. And it might be that they have to show it 3 times before they graduate in 3 different places, and that can be done too. So it is bigger than a course. Dan asked, is this webinar available for viewing later? Yes, it is. And we are making a link that will probably come out tomorrow. I'll probably get to upload it and make the video tomorrow, and then you'll get a link, a follow-up link. And then we've got another question. We have students where we want them to do a portfolio to have them record competencies and upload artifacts. Could this work for this? Yes, Moodle has a e-portfolio system that talks, and works with it called Mahara, and we support Mahara as well. And Mahara, you can upload in assignments in a course. It's linked to your portfolio. So you would upload your work to your e-portfolio, and then in a course, let's say they are doing just part of a portfolio, and the portfolio is made through their whole high school career, let's say, they can upload, or it's linked to one part of their portfolio for the instructor to mark. That could be tied to competencies, and it could be marked as competent or not competent, or submitted as evidence of competency and be rated and marked that way. So yes, very good question. And those things could be very powerful if you work them in tandem and they all talk. Okay, somebody said, can I speak a little bit louder? Okay, how's that? Any better? Okay. Okay, good. All right, let me know if it's not loud enough. Okay. So back to the ways that we could set site-wide competency rules. You don't have to set one. You could have teachers setting those rules as well. The other way, so first way, is you could require that they attach evidence, and that evidence could come from the ePortfolio Mahara, which is linked with Moodle. It could come from another source. Maybe their Google Drive, for example, which there are repositories and ways that Google Drive can talk in Moodle. You could have the system mark it as complete. So maybe if they met that competency in a course, then their competency profile, it's marked off as well. And recommend the competency. We could recommend that the student work on that a little bit more. Okay, so that there are some things that we could do at a site level. Okay, so now the site administrator is done with their setup. So they've enabled the competencies on the site. They've set up their competency framework or added their criteria, and they've added the competencies to the different frameworks. Okay, now we can hand it over to the teachers. Okay, and teachers can then work with the competencies in their courses. So what the teacher would do is go to their course. So I'll open up this course here, and what we can do is we can add competencies as a teacher now because they're in the system. And so I go under my course administration as a teacher, and at the bottom, if you have Moodle 3.1 and above, there's a new link called competencies. Okay, now I can add competencies to the course, and anything that the site administrator added, we could add. Okay, so that just got added. And so competencies in this course. And it gives me a little overview already, and it says, I personally, because I was also a student in this course testing it out, have met 1 out of the 3 competencies because I have competencies tied to different things. Here are some of the things, the activities that I already set up of what they have to do. So here, in Implement Innovations, they have to turn in this assignment and get a certain grade, and then Moodle will mark it off as competent. Work creatively with others. Also, I don't have any activities, so this one the teacher would have to rate. And then this one, I would have to attach evidence to show that I am. And so again, under here, I could also put send for review and ask the teacher. So maybe it was performance-based, and I felt that in my last exhibition of learning, for example, that I showed that I met that competency, and I want my teacher to review and see if they agree, and they would mark it or not. Okay, complete the competency means that Moodle did it. So the next step is for the teacher to determine which out of the competency frameworks apply to their course and pick them out. Okay, then the next step after that would be if you want to, you don't have to do this, but I usually do this in my courses, is attach them to the activities. So if I go back to my course and I go to the first assignment that I have, which is right here, and I turn my editing on, which only teachers can do, now I can go to the settings and edit those. And in Moodle 3.1 and above, we have competencies, which we didn't have before. And I put that this competency, and here I could search for other ones, let's add another one, is also met by this assignment. And then I put if they complete this, then they're going to get it checked off as proficient in that competency. Now, there's also related, and we had this in earlier versions of Moodle, the activity completion, what makes it complete. And I kept it pretty simple, but I could say that they have to get a certain grade. Right now I just put that they had to turn it in, which really wouldn't show competency, but I wanted to get some reports with some data, and I didn't want to grade them all before you came. But in real life, we probably would have had to put that they get a certain grade, and we probably would have put in, and then what would open up is what will that grade have to be, like 80% or better or something like that. Or on a rubric, which can be attached to this, they have to score a certain score. Okay, so then we can go back to the course, and that's how we attach the competencies to the different activities if you want to. Okay, then let me just look at my notes of what we have to do in what order. So we talked about that. You can, there's a new report for teachers that's very helpful too, and that's the competency breakdown report. So in Moodle 3.0 and above, under course admin, I'm in assignment admin right now, under reports, there's a new report link called competency breakdown. And what right now it's showing me, but I can jump to my different users and show how they're doing. Okay, I got a couple questions. Okay, so there's confusion, and it is a little confusing until you get working and you do some workflows about the difference between completing an activity and fulfilling the rule for competency. Often they're linked, okay? So often what you might say, if you set up, you don't have to set up site rules, but you could, and you could say, for this competency at the site level where we were before, if it's complete in the course, which is the activity completion, I'll take that, and I will say that then they're complete in the competency report, in their profile. So then they're linked, and they're kind of the same thing. However, there are other options. Another rule that we could say is what I want them to do is show evidence instead, and there is no activity completion for that, and they have to upload evidence maybe when the course is over. You know, I've taken my whole chemistry course, and now I have to show evidence that I can write a lab report. And there was no assignment in that course where I had to get it graded or anything. I was just expected to do that. Now, either from my ePortfolio or on my own, I am adding that evidence, and a reviewer will mark off if I am competent or not. Okay, so there are different ways. Sometimes they can be the same if you set it up that way. If they got a 90 or better on a test, they're competent. Then activity completion and competency are the same. But if you say, oh, I want another set of evidence uploaded and an external reviewer to look at it, then they're not related. Okay, so I hope that doesn't make it worse. There's so much, I think the reason it's confusing is there's so much functionality and choice involved in how you set this up for different organizations and how you want to deploy this. So yeah. Also, if people are thinking about going to competency-based education or tracking competencies and they just want to talk with us one-on-one, we'd be happy to consult with you a little bit on that and talk about the best way to go about it. Can a rule require multiple activities? It can. And I was looking at an example in a forum on the Moodle.org where they had to show in 4 different places they met that competency, but it was up to the student to pick multiple pathways and multiple ways that they could show it. But you could also lock that down and say, here are 4 times they have to get that competent before we will mark it competent. And that could be a site-wide rule, could be a course-wide rule too. So lots and lots of different ways to set it up, and that's probably why people are kind of saying, I'm confused. It is a little confusing because there are so many ways that you could approach this. So it's really made to look at how your organization wants to define competency and how that will work for you. Okay. Let's say here is in the competency report, you can look at each user and see their competency. And let's say this one was not tied to an activity, which it's not, and I have to rate that. Maybe they did a science project and I, as the teacher, am going to decide if they created new and worthwhile ideas, or maybe they uploaded an artifact that I reviewed. So I go to not rated as the teacher, and here is what it's attached to, and but there might not be anything attached to it too. And I go to rate, and there might be evidence uploaded, but in this case there isn't. And I go to rate, and this is the standard scale that I chose. But you can make your own scale or choose like the separate and connected ways of knowing scale too. Just know you're not, it doesn't have to be competent or not yet, but I went with the simplest one. So I'm going to say competent, and I'm going to say great job. Okay. So that's how, if Moodle isn't looking for some activity completion to mark it off and it needs human reviewing, that's how we do that, okay? And the student in different places, they'll show you later, can say when they're ready to have different things reviewed and upload evidence and so on. So that's how we rate the competencies. Okay, and maybe look at today as a 2,000-foot view of what's possible. This took me a little time to work out. It helps when you have a real work case of how you want it to work, and then we can kind of work with you from there of how you want it to work and what's the best path, because there's so much you can do. So that kind of concludes part 1, where we were just talking about competencies. Now, part 2 gets even more powerful. That is related to part 1, and that has to do with the individual learning plans, which are going to, use the competencies in them. So you kind of have to do this work ahead of time. You have to, I think for learning plans to work well, you have to have your competency frameworks and competencies set up ahead of time. It helps if you have it attached to your different courses and learning activities, okay? Then we can come to a learning plan. And a learning plan is bigger than a course. It can be a series of courses or pathways at which the student will get to meet that plan, okay? And it can be very individualized, or you can have like groupings of students go through different plans. So there are different ways that you can do learning plans. I'm going to start out with the learning plan template. Let's say for my entire high school, I'm going to require that they do these 21st century competencies in a learning plan, and maybe some courses are required and then they have some choices as to how they're going to do it, let's say that. And that's how the learning plan might look. Okay. Under site admin, which is way down here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to competencies again. And now we have learning plan templates that we can push out to individuals or we can push out to groups. So we're just kind of making a template that we can use later. So I created one ahead of time called the 21st Century Skills Graduation Template. And this doesn't get tied to anyone yet. It's just a template that we can push out to different people or groups. Okay, I got another question. I love the questions. Okay, great question, and I have to think about it a little bit. What happens if you change assignments from year to year? So you've got this set up, but students in year one have one assignment, but in year two have a different assignment. Is there a mega view that should go across 4 years? The assignments could change from year to year, how this works. Okay, so in a typical way that a high school would work is you would have your course, like your blended learning course, let's say, for the year. And I might have some assignments, right? And I might have some competencies in there and tied to certain assignments. And the student completes those assignments and meets the criteria for completing them. Maybe they get a 90% or better and they're marked off as competent. Now, in the next year, I would make a clean copy of that course with no student data, and I would restore it, and I might delete that assignment, and I might make a new assignment and attach competencies. Now, the student that was already marked competent and took the old course would still be marked as complete. But the new freshman coming into Chemistry 101 would have to do the new assignment and get checked off for the competencies that are tied to that. So it doesn't impact the old student. That's how I would do that. And then the question was, does it just track one cohort at a time? It tracks all individuals. It's bigger than a class. And so from year to year, you're probably restoring and bringing up a new copy and making changes. You wouldn't want to change your master because then people that were competent, if you got rid of that assignment, suddenly that competency might uncheck, right? So if you do have one master course and you don't do the backup and restore, like I was saying, what I've sometimes done in cases like that is I have made cohorts, and I'll show you how to make cohorts in a minute, and I'd assign the cohort that already was competent to the old activity and maybe hide it from the new cohort. So they were still marked off as done. The new cohort sees the new assignment, okay? But we don't want to delete things from the old people that already showed competency, or they would disappear. So I would either archive their course and keep their competencies, or I would start creating cohorts and hiding activities that have already been completed by different cohorts from the new cohorts. Okay. The next question is, okay, we already answered that one. All right, good. We're doing good. I like these questions. It's making more sense out of kind of a complex thing, and it's so new to education. I mean, this is brand new technology we've not had before. Okay, so in this learning plan that I created, I picked 3 competencies, and 2 are linked to courses, but 1 isn't. So they might have to upload evidence from somewhere or somehow to get competent in that, perhaps. And so this Think Creatively, I don't have any courses linked to it. So the student would maybe need me to review that and ask for a review, like an exhibition of learning, or maybe I'd have to upload evidence. Another question. Okay, we have students who have different requirements, and she has some acronyms I don't understand, but so we have like one group that has one requirement and a second group, but they're in the same cohort, which happens a lot in schools, right? You might have special needs kids that have an IEP that have different goals that they're working towards than other kids. Can these be examined separately? Absolutely. What I would do then is I would make a learning plan template for the NP students, in your case, and a different learning plan for the CNL. And then, depending on what competencies you're attaching, they would meet those, and those would be tracked differently. And maybe use groups and groupings and cohorts in your class to further differentiate, which you can do in Moodle. And so that one group, I often do this in my courses, maybe one group, when they log in, they see the same course, let's say, but based on login, maybe one group we know that they're lower readers, let's say, and I have the reading materials at a 4th grade Lexile level, and that's what those students see. But a more advanced student in reading would see harder reading materials and wouldn't see the other, and the pictures would be the same. I could even have different assignments for the different groups based on their login, and they wouldn't necessarily know that they got a different reading assignment at a different Lexile level or a different requirement on their assignment. So you could hide things from that. They'd have different learning plans with different criteria that they have to meet, okay? So maybe I say for one group to meet their goals, they have to get 80% or better, but another one they have to get 100. So we can do this. That's why this gets so powerful for personalized learning. And again, you might want to consult with us or have us help you set up the first few and how we would do that. We already have done the different groups and groupings and courses, and we can show you how that's done, and we have help tutorials on that. Now it's just a matter of making the separate learning plan templates and pushing them out to those groups, and they could still be in the same cohort, same group. So really interesting. Great question. Okay, so this is where it gets kind of fun too. In this learning plan, they have to do work creatively with others and implement innovations. And the student can see this too. They've been assigned this learning plan, and it shows them what courses have those. And if you have self-enrollment set up, they could pick different pathways to get that competency. Okay, so they could get some choices too. And here's implement innovations, and it shows me the courses. They could either take Jumpstart, or they could take this increase the online toolkit, and they could get it that way too. And then this one, they're most likely going to have to do an exhibition of learning or upload things, and that's just how I set it up. So, and then I could add more competencies if I wanted to. So if I wanted to create that one, let's just add that. And now that one was linked to a course, so 75% of my competencies have been linked to online things in Moodle, and a few things they're going to have to do outside of the Moodle courses. So to make a new learning plan template, very similar to all of these, you put in your name, anything with a red asterisk has to be done, a description, and you save your changes. Okay, so we'll put practice just so we can see how this is done. And then from here, we'll go to Save Changes. And then from here, we would add the competencies, which are already in the frameworks that we can just link to. So I could say, okay, I want this and I want this one. Well, I guess I get to do one at a time, and I can add as many. So I want that one, and I want this one. Okay, so this is how, and then we can apply the learning plan template to different people or groups. Can faculty look at an individual students or aggregate or both? Typically, you're going to look at the individual student, but there are some aggregate reports of like how many competencies have been met in your course, but then I don't know who met which ones, right? So the report that I was showing before that I recommend is probably the individual one, although you could get an aggregate one. So let's go to my home, and in my course, let's go to my courses where I have competencies. From here, there is a new report that I kind of like called the Competency Breakdown. Now, here you have to pull down your user. So last time we looked at Luke Skywalker, now we're looking at test user. They're only competent in this one, and these have not yet been rated. Okay, and I don't think these have activities, so the teacher would have to go in and rate them. So that's probably my favorite one. Okay, and we'll get into outcomes in a little bit too. That might work differently depending on your purposes. But that's probably the report that I'd look at by individual. Okay. We didn't talk about assigning a learning plan to a cohort. Just in case you're unfamiliar with cohorts, under admin, you have to have your cohorts set up first under site admin. Then you go to users, permissions. Let's see if I did that right. Users accounts, not permissions, sorry. And then from here, cohorts. Okay, there it is. Then I made one. Okay, if I wanted to add a new cohort, let's say here, practice 2. I don't have to make an ID because there's no red there, so that's the name of it. Now, there are 0 users in here right now, so this little people means add people to the cohort, and then I can start adding people. So let's just add Julie and Jim and Parker. So this really can help us with differentiating. And let's say that, and this could be like your NP group. Okay, so then I can go back. Let's just go home. And let's go to our learning plan templates and assign that to a cohort. Okay, now I'm going to go to competencies, learning plan template, and we can go to edit and add cohorts to sync. And here are my different cohorts, and I could add them and add add them. So now that learning plan is going to be pushed out to all of those users in that cohort. Okay, and that's why using a template can be so efficient. So let's talk about where the user sees these learning plans. So under my profile, let's see here, in their profile is where they can get it. And then right here is learning plans. And I have an enrichment learning plan, and I have it set up so that the user could even put in a learning plan too, and they could create it too and have it reviewed by their teacher if they wanted. But here is my learning plan, and it shows that I have been rated as competent in 1, and 2 of them I have not been rated as competent yet. And if I wanted to put my evidence of prior learning to show, I would click on New Evidence, and I'll put Thinking Creatively Evidence. And then if I wanted to describe it, it could be a link like to a movie I've made, or let me just throw something in there. I'll just drag it, drop. So hang on. Here we go. We'll put in this. Here it comes. And now I can, that took a little bit longer than I thought. Okay, save. And I can link my competencies that I think that this fits. So I will say that I think it fits that. I'm going to add that. Okay, and then now it can be reviewed, and the other person can review and see if I met that. And if I go back to my profile learning plan, and we go under here, we've got to look at my reviewer. I can request a review now, okay, and then the reviewer will review it and rate it. Okay, so that's kind of the workflow of how that could be done. So it puts more ownership on the student for their learning too. Okay, so that's kind of how they can put prior learning, or they can show evidence that they've done things. Another feature that's been added at the course level that I like is students can see their learning plans right in their courses. And so if I go to my courses and I go here, there's now a learning plan block, and it's saying as the teacher, I see this now as the teacher, oh, Tammy Frame is waiting for review for Think Creatively. And so, and I'm also in here as a learner, so these are my plans, but here I know as a teacher that I have to review this. So I could, here's the evidence that they uploaded, and I can rate it, and I'll say competent and rate. Okay. So now that will show up as in their profile as competent. Okay. So again, that kind of shows, I like that learning plan block that you can add to your courses as brand new. Okay, now we're covering a lot. We're going to quickly go through outcomes. Outcomes were made in Moodle 2.4. I think that, in my opinion, it was Moodle's first attempt to kind of track competencies. For Moodle, outcomes, it gets confusing, can be used as the word competency or goal. And there is a great chart that was made by Jonathan Moore, who we sometimes work with, who is awesome. And let me see here. Let me get that. It's on my other screen here. And I just want to show where it compares outcomes to the competencies that we just did with the learning plans. Okay, so outcomes were made first, and they still exist, and they will measure learning objectives. You can define those beyond the course level. You can import or export with a plugin. But here's the difference. This can be in the grade book where the others do not integrate with the grade book. Okay. We can put it for review in the course through that learning block, but it isn't part of the grading, and I'll show you how an outcome is graded in the grade book in a minute. All of these things have to do with learning plans and competencies. So to me, these are the new things that they built on in 3.1, and outcomes is what we had in 2.4 up until now. So you can kind of see that there is some overlap and there is some difference. The biggest difference is that outcomes can happen in the grade book. Okay, I kind of wish they would combine them, and I wonder if in future versions they will. What I would ask myself is I would test these different things out and play with them, but eventually what it's going to come out to is what is your purpose, and then you'll choose which one or both to use in which instances. Okay, so yeah, so we'll now look at outcomes. It's similar to the competencies, but maybe for your situation, they work better. Okay, so let's go back here to my other browser. Let's move this back to where we were. So we'll start with outcomes. Okay, and I think that I chose to do these second because there's less that outcomes can do other than they work with the grade book, which is kind of cool. So again, just like competencies, the site administrator has to enable the outcomes, okay? And under site administration, we go to advanced features, and the first one is enabled outcomes, and so you would want to have that checked, okay? So otherwise teachers can't use it. So that's step one, is the site administrator has to do that. Now, you could have outcomes that are set for everybody across the entire site, or you can have course level outcomes, and you could also have activity outcomes at the activity level, just like we had with competencies and learning plans. So we'll start with if you're going to have these standard for everybody across the whole site. So what we do here, it's a little bit different, is we go to site, let me see if this is right, site administration grades, because it's more tied with the grade book, okay? And then we go to outcomes here, all right? And then you just add your outcomes. So they aren't hierarchical like the other was, where we could have subcategories. So remember how I had one category as my first level I called the competency, and the next one I called the behaviors. I can't do that here. They're just all outcomes, and they're all equal. And so you can add a new outcome, and I can put speaking skills, let's just say, whatever it's going to be. And this would now be available for everybody in courses to choose from. Here's where the scales are, and I'll use the simple Tammy scale this time. And that's how the criteria by which, oh, we've got to do a short name. The short name can be the same as the long name, so I'll just cut and paste. All right, and like I said, there's a lot of overlap between how this and competencies work. You know, they're kind of similar. So, okay, so here are my different outcomes. All right. Now, if I want to go to a course, that's how we could add them site-wide, and then anybody can choose from these. If we go into the course level now, let's go back to our course, and from here we're going to go to the course admin, and we're going to go to outcomes, which is here. And here are my, I already added communication and collaboration before. If I wanted to add speaking skills to this course, I can. So now these are the outcomes for the course. And so that's fine. Those are there. I don't have to add save or anything like that. Now, if I wanted to, I can do them at the activity level too. So here, under practice, I think I put them here, this assignment. Under edit settings, they're in Moodle 3.1 and above. If the site administrator enabled it, we now have a tab called outcomes. And I could say that this activity meets these two outcomes, okay? And I can save and return to the course. Now, if I want to grade, let's talk about the grade book, all right? Now it's tied to, I would put if they're proficient in these when I'm grading. It sort of gives more information to the grade. So if I go to grades, let's say I'm ready to grade, or let's do it even from the grade book. Let's even go right from here. I'm the teacher. I click at practice. I've had 4 people that participated, and 3 have submitted and are ready for grading. Okay, let's look at test user. They submitted something for grading, and let's just grade. Now, in Moodle 3.1 and above, I showed this in my last webinar, there's now built-in tools for commenting. So if I want to comment or draw on this and leave comments for the student, I can do that. You know, I can show different parts and say, good job. You know, I can, it actually what it does is it takes what they've done and it allows me to have all of these tools. So that's one thing. That's just in Moodle 3.1. So that's the first thing, is I can comment right on here and they're going to see those changes. Okay. Then I also tied to this assignment a rubric, an electronic rubric, which Moodle does. And I already rated this rubric, you can see. So I picked what their criteria was and I wrote how they did. So there was a rubric. And then now there is the outcomes are also here. And this was the scale, Tammy's simple scale that I picked. So I'll put highly competent and competent. Okay. And right now we're in grading. And I can put any overall feedback in there I want and save changes. And if I wanted to, I could notify the student too. And then they could see all of the feedback that I either wrote manually on here. They can see the rubric. They can see now the outcomes that I put in here. Now the outcomes don't really affect the grade like the rubric did. It's just giving more information about the different outcomes that went with this assignment. Okay, so depending on your purposes, that may be helpful. There's also a helpful outcome report that's new to the gradebook that can help teachers a lot. So if we go to the gradebook and we go, let's just start over. If I go to course admin and I go to grades, instead of the grader report, now we have an outcomes report. And it shows that the course average was highly competent, speaking skills We had 3 people competent. These are the activities that it was tied to. Here's the number of grades that it did. And that just kind of tells me how we're doing on our course outcomes. Okay, I'm going to stop. That's what I have prepared for today. I'm only one step ahead of you guys in learning this because this is very brand new technology, but I'm very excited. I wanted to do a webinar to kind of show what the possibilities are. We'd be very excited to talk with schools and people in higher ed or professional development that want to use these tools and kind of talk through the best workflow for you, because there's so many different ways that you can approach it, which can also be a little confusing at first. But I'm so excited that these new tools exist, and I'm excited to see how educators will use them to personalize learning in ways that we never have been able to do before. What questions, does anybody have any final questions for me that I can try and answer? If you're feeling slightly lost, I know the feeling. It took me a while to get this far. Partially, I think the biggest confusing thing is there are so many tools now available to us. What's the best way to approach it for your workflow of what you're trying to do? But if you do have a competency-based education system, or you're thinking about moving this way, these tool sets can really, really help you, and we can help you figure out which are the best ones to use. Let me just make sure that I don't have any unanswered questions. Okay. Oh, wait, it does say you have an unanswered question. Where would that be? Questions. All right. Let's see here. I'm just having a little problem with the GoToWebinar. I can see that there are some unanswered questions. I'm just not seeing the questions. Where did they hide those? Just closing windows. All right. Oh, here they are. Found them. Okay, sorry about that. My bad. Oh, I see. They're showing up as unanswered because I didn't put them in the trash can. It looks like there are no additional questions unless somebody wants to submit one, but I really appreciate your questions. That made it a little easier, and I'm sure people had the same questions. If you think of more and you want to email them to us, or if you want to call up and talk about, okay, here's how it works in our organization, or what we're trying to do, how would we do that in Moodle? I'd be happy to answer those too. Like I said, today was kind of the 2,000-foot view of how these tools work and what's possible. It's a little overwhelming because they're all new tool sets we've never had before, and they can work in multiple different ways depending on what you're trying to do. But thanks for signing up. Like I said, I'm really eager for pioneers and innovative educators who want to start trying to use these technologies to track things, because what I get excited about is this puts the ownership in the hands of the students. They can see a dashboard of what competencies they need to accomplish and where are they and what are the pathways that they could choose, or how could they upload evidence for their learning style to demonstrate what they know. And that's what the research says we should be doing. But then the problem always was, well, how do we track that? How do we set that up? How could one person in one classroom do that for all these different students? And so the technology is making that more and more possible. Well, thank you so much, and I wish you a great afternoon and a great holiday. I will be sending out the recording link tomorrow, so you should see that in your inbox tomorrow. And thanks again for attending. Bye-bye.